I did not go on one single holiday whilst I was paying off my debt. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Veronia, and here I talk about all things money, your career, and creating success through a positive mindset. So I'm not sure if you've noticed, but I actually have a new camera and the quality looks so much more different. I'm not gonna lie, in my previous videos I was just using my phone because I was trying out YouTube and seeing if I liked it or not, but yeah, I'm very excited and I'm so happy. Just want to give a quick shout out to my fiance because he did buy this camera for me, so I am very grateful. And I'm hoping it means I can create some great quality content for you guys. So in my previous video, I spoke about my debt journey and how I actually ended up with £16,000 worth of debt. And I thought in this video, I would actually explain how I was able to pay that debt off in just over 18 months. Now, I'm not gonna lie, there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into paying it off that fast, especially because I had a relatively low income. And actually, just for a bit of transparency, I'm going to tell you what range my income was when I was paying this off, and I was actually earning less than £30,000 a year. And if you're actually even more curious, my income was in between £25,000 to £30,000 a year. If you live within the southeast of England, so around the London area, you'd probably realize that's not a lot of money. So I was really proud of myself that I was able to pay off that debt so fast, considering how much my take-home pay was every single month. Also, in my previous video, you would have seen my starting net worth, and obviously if you haven't seen that video, I would encourage you to watch it because you will know what my starting point was. And in this video, I'm actually going to be showing you how my net worth changed every 6 months, where you will eventually see my net worth going from negative to positive. So I'm very excited about showing you guys. It did take a while for me to hit the ground running. During that time, I was still getting used to budgeting and really starting to learn about personal finance. So I was still making a lot of mistakes. I was still overspending in some places, and I was really struggling to actually save some money to start overpaying my debt. I think it took probably more than 6 months for me to actually start overpaying. But once I started creating some positive habits, I really started to get some momentum, and then I was actually able to accelerate my debt payoff. So the first major thing I did was create a budget. And if you've already watched my previous videos, you will have heard me talk about why you need a budget, why it's important, and how to actually create a budget. So if you haven't seen those previous videos, I'll put a link in the description below. And that is exactly what I did. I obviously included my starting net worth statement, but there were also a few things that I noticed when I actually started budgeting. I actually noticed that I would be overspending in quite a lot of areas. So for example, if I had any birthdays to attend to, or if there are any other work events, I would end up spending quite a lot of money. I also had quite a lot of bills as well. So for example, with my car, I had to pay road tax, car insurance, road coverage, petrol, and servicing every year. And that's when I realized I hadn't actually been planning any of my expenses. So whenever I thought I had some money to overpay some of my debts, I realized that the next month that my car insurance was due and I would have to use that money to pay that instead. So actually, when I started budgeting, it meant that I could put some money aside every single month, which would pay for those major expenses. Again, it did take me a while just to get used to budgeting, but once I was doing it every single month, it got a lot easier as I went. The second thing I did was cut costs majorly, and this is where I really started sacrificing, and this was probably after 6 months in, because I realized I wasn't actually paying my debt off as fast as I wanted to. That's when I really started to look through my categories and think about what can I cut or what can I give up completely. So as an example, my eating out budget, I drastically cut it. If you actually want to know how much my eating budget was, I'm going to be transparent with you guys. Within the first 6 months, and even before that, I was probably averaging about over £60 a month on eating out. I mean, some people would actually consider that quite low, but for me, it meant that I was probably eating out about twice a month. And I also had another budget for things like entertainment. So if I wanted to go to things like mini golf or the cinema, I also had a budget for about £60 a month. After that, when I really wanted to accelerate my debt payoff, that got cut in half. So I was budgeting about £30 for eating out and about £30 for my entertainment costs, which obviously obviously meant that I had to limit how many times I would be going out in a month. Now, obviously that can be difficult, especially when your friends want to go out and they want to see you and they want to catch up. But to be honest, I really got to the point where I just wanted to pay this debt off as soon as possible. So I had to start turning down people. If I was going out with one of my friends during that month, I couldn't go out with the other. So it just meant that I had to plan when I was seeing my friends. But you do have to make sacrifices. Of course, if I could do free things like going to someone's house and maybe having a games night instead, I would do that. So I wasn't just sitting at home doing nothing and feeling sorry for myself. If I was going out, it was going to be once a month. But if I wanted to see my friends again, it would be at their house, or we might go to a free event in London, for example. So it wasn't horrendous. However, just remember that even though you're going to a free event, you've got to pay for travel there. So that would have come out of my budget. And also, if you were hungry and you didn't bring food with you, you'd probably have to find food there as well. So I did have to be careful with that. But all in all, it did go okay, and I was still able to see my friends, even if it wasn't as often as they would have liked. Even with things like food, Aldi and Lidl was still my best friends. I was trying to find the cheapest food possible, but still relatively healthy, of course. So I wasn't eating noodles every single day unless I overspent on my budget. I was also doing things like meal prepping. Every single weekend, I would meal prep for the week ahead, both my lunch and dinner. So it meant that I didn't have to spend money when I went to work. And that probably saved me about £100 a month, because I knew people were spending probably between £5 to £10 a day on food at work. And you don't actually realize how much that amounts to once you get to the end of the month. There were also some sacrifices that I had to just cut out completely, which were quite upsetting, but it just had to be done. So one thing I did have to cut out was holidays. I did not go on one single holiday whilst I was paying off my debt. And it was so strange because I actually love going on holiday. So the fact that I did have to make that sacrifice and completely cut it out was quite upsetting. But I did know if I wanted to pay this debt off, then holidays had to be gone. You probably won't realize it, but you can actually end up spending hundreds, if not thousands, on just one holiday. So that had to go. Another thing was clothes. Now I know that I have enough clothes, but sometimes you just see a top or a pair of jeans that you really like. I realized that I had enough clothes, and it meant that I just had to stop buying clothes completely. And within that 18 months, I don't think I bought a single pair of clothes. It actually got to the point where my fiance felt so bad for me, he offered to buy me clothes. That is how much I wanted to pay this debt off. So the next thing I did was actually cut my housing costs quite drastically. And I thought that was actually really important, because your housing cost is probably the biggest cost in your budget. So I knew that if I wanted to accelerate my debt payoff, I needed to sacrifice my housing somehow. So I actually live in two places. One, I part own with my mum in London. That was my main residence. But as I mentioned in my previous video, my workplace was actually based outside London. So although I was driving to work, it was just too far to commute. So I actually ended up having to live near that area. When I first moved to the area, I actually decided I was going to save money and move into a HMO. And that is basically a house of multiple occupation, which essentially means you will live with different housemates. They're usually either students or working professionals, but in my case, I was living with working professionals. I was actually only paying £500 a month, and that included all of my bills, so it did save me quite a lot on housing. In the future, I might do a video on HMOs because it is not for the faint-hearted, but again, I had to make sacrifices, and if it meant I was going to live with 5 other people just so I can overpay on my debt, I was going to do it. I actually went a step further and decided that I really wanted to pay my debt off a couple of months earlier than I was planning to. So I ended up finding an even cheaper place to live. Now you're probably thinking I'm crazy at this moment, because £500, especially in Southeast, is really cheap considering it's bills included. But I was gonna find somewhere cheaper, and I actually did. I ended up becoming a lodger and moving into a family home, but the rent was £300 a month. All bills included. I just had to take it. Now, I'm not crazy. I did my due diligence. I met with the family first. They protected my deposit. We went through all the checks, and it meant that I was able to save another £200 that I could put towards my debt. The other thing that I did was actually choose my debt strategy. Now, there are many different strategies that you can use, but my main two were either the debt snowball and the debt avalanche. Basically, with the debt snowball, you rank your debt smallest to largest, and you actually pay the smallest one first. And this is despite the interest rate. Whereas debt avalanche means that you paid the highest interest rate first. And if you would actually like me to do a video on debt strategies in more detail, then just let me know in the comments below. Whilst I was paying off my debt, I actually tried out the debt snowball and the avalanche method, and actually realized that the avalanche method made more sense because my overdraft was interest free anyway for a set amount of time. So I knew that mathematically it actually made more sense for me to try and tackle my car loan first. The last major thing I did was chuck any other extra money onto my debt. During that time, I actually ended up being in a car accident, and it wasn't my fault at all. So I ended up getting compensated for it, and the insurance company ended up giving me about £2,000. I didn't actually use all of that to pay off my debt. Half of it I did put towards my car loan, but I actually ended up saving it for other major expenses like my car insurance, for example. And that was the same with bonuses as well. So if I got any bonuses at work, I would either chuck it towards my debt, or I would try and use that to pay my other expenses. So I've now explained how I was actually able to pay my debt off, but I thought it would be useful if I actually show you my net worth statement so that you can see my progress. So 6 months in, it was about April 2019, and my net worth was just under £14,000. Now at this time, I was still overspending in some areas, and I wasn't really overpaying my debt at all. I think I did 1 or 2 months worth of car overpayments, but because of the minimum payments on my car loan, I was able to see that loan start to decrease. You can also see I was trying to build a starter emergency fund. I will probably do a later video to explain why I was doing that. So if you do want to know, make sure you subscribe. 12 months down the line is where I really started to accelerate my progress. So one tip I would actually say is make sure you do focus on one strategy, because I was trying to do a mix of avalanche and snowball, and I think that actually hindered part of my progress. So in October 2019, I was actually able to get my net worth down to just over -£7,000. And that was due to me cutting costs in different areas. So that included petrol, eating out, which I've already mentioned, entertainment, and any other small expenses. This meant that I was actually able to save £500 out of my income, which I could use to pay off my debt. So every single month, as soon as I got paid, I took that £500 out of my income and chucked it straight towards my debt. And when I actually moved house, it meant that I had an extra £200, which meant that I was able to overpay my debt by £700 every month. And that actually led to April 2020, where I was almost at the finish line. So you can see by then I finished paying off my car, and I was able to save over £1,000 worth of interest because I paid early. And because I paid off my car, it meant that I had over £200 more that I could put towards my overdraft. I also had about £1,700 in my savings, and I did actually decide to take the risk to just chuck it at my overdraft because I wanted to get rid of that debt so fast. Just a note, I do think that you should keep at least some money just as an emergency, but I did know that if an emergency within that next month did come up, I could technically just take the money out of my overdraft because it was still interest free. By the end of April, once I'd put all of my savings into my overdraft, I only had £100 left. So then when it got to payday in May, I was able to pay that £100 left, and the rest I just put it into my emergency fund, and that is essentially how I paid £16,000 worth of debt in just over 18 months. So guys, if you did like this video, then please do give me a thumbs up, and if you have any debt stories, then do let me know in the comments. And if you want to watch any more of my content, I post every Friday, so please do subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next week.